All right, welcome back, everybody, to Cool's Interviews. Today we have a fun guest, and we're going to cover a whole host of topics. He's written quite a few things, so I'm sure we have no, shortage of ideas that we can talk about. But I will pass it over to Mason, who is our guest, and let him discuss with you a little bit about his background and how he kind of got started into being an author in all these different fields. Mason?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Mason Winfield here. Um, I was a lit man. I have a master's degree in Brit Lit. And I mean, it's from Boston College. Uh, it's not a cupcake degree. I mean, they really crack on you. They make you do research, they make you learn stuff. I picked a traditional program. So my background is basically literature. I was a classics minor in college, and a master's degree in lit doesn't immediately qualify you for things, but you get some skills. You can read and write the hell out of anything, and usually talk about it. So I was a country English teacher at a boarding school for dyslexic youth called the Gow School in upstate New York. Sort of felt like, it was time to move on. And I was debating, what do I do? Do I go back to graduate school, try to get a PhD in something I really, you know, really would be interested in, and then try to get a job thereafter? Or should I go freelance? And at about that moment, the X Files is on. And I realized instantly that the public was fascinated by paranormal stuff. And I also thought that a good scholar who really went at it in an objective fashion. You know, what's the research? What's the testimony? It's not like you don't base your impressions on entertainment, TV, Hollywood, books, and base it on research because there is real research out there. So I thought there would be a window for someone like that, and it might make a really good career switch. And then I also realized, in the paranormal, nobody asks for qualifications. Think
Right.
about that. Really think about it. You go to a party and you go, "Hey, I'm a doctor," and they go, "Oh, where'd you get your degree? What's your specialty? What hospital do you work at?" You go, "Hey, baby, I'm a lawyer." You go, where'd you study? What do you? But you show up at a party and you just go, "Hey, honey, I'm a ghost guy," and everybody just goes, "Cool." And so I realized that it was a really freelance, wacko, wild goose field, and it was a good one to try to bring a little professionalism to. And I'm not saying that to insult other people, but I don't know. I just went about it in a very academic way. And why did I pick that? Well, the paranormal was always an interest of mine. I mean, every American little kid loves monsters and spooks. Why didn't I grow up? That might have been the better question because an armchair interest in paranormal stuff was always with me, even when I was teaching English. I was reading all kinds of material. And I guess I just decided to specialize in it as a career shift, and it's been a good one.
Yeah, no, one person I've always enjoyed as far as their studies with the paranormal was Harry Houdini. We always talk about him when we do some presentations and stuff. Just because he did so much studies and because he didn't like people being swindled and lied to, especially being a magician. He knew the tricks, and so yeah, I mean, you talk about Boston. There's that big thing with the Boston medium Marjorie and stuff, and yeah, no, it's interesting. It's always fun to see why or where people get the hook. So yours was kind of X Files and seeing people's reactions to it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because Houdini, there's some really interesting stuff about him. I mean, one is you're aware that he went into researching psychic mediums. First of all, there was a big spike in it, late 1800s, early 1900s in his day. And he went into because he He wanted to contact his late mother. I mean, this guy loved his mother. I think it's beautiful. You know, he just loved his mother, and when she passed away, he was devastated, and he wanted to maybe speak to her. And you know that he partnered up with Arthur Conan Doyle for quite a while.
Yeah, I always found that interesting because I'm sure you'll go into it, but the guy that
Briefly,
wrote Sherlock Holmes and then his connection with the spiritualist movement, it just seems kind of contradictory, you know?
well, yeah, that's a good observation. Um, Conan Doyle, um, he uh, he was a big man at the time the Boer War started in Africa. And the Boer War was an imperialist war of whites versus whites. You know, there was like, whatever. I'm not going to get into sub Saharan politics, but um, Conan Doyle's son wanted to go to the war, but he was nearsighted. So Conan Doyle calls up some generals and heavy hitters that he knows and gets his son into the army. Son promptly goes down there and gets his full head shot off. And Conan Doyle always felt guilty about that because this would not have happened if he hadn't kind of pulled the strings. So he was always visiting psychic mediums to be able to talk to his lost son. And the irony of all this is that the creator, well, first of all, the great magician Houdini never found a psychic medium that convinced him. And the guy you'd think would have the perspicuity of the saints, Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, the greatest literary sleuth in history, he never met a psychic medium that didn't fool him. He fell for some really, without qualification, hook, line, and sinker for some crazy, crazy stuff. I'll add one story about Houdini from my family.
Okay.
I know, and my family were not BSers. You know, they didn't. I mean, the only celebrity that I recall that was ever mentioned in my family. My family is mostly from Ohio, South Carolina, upstate New York. Apparently, my grandfather, my dad's father, Mason C. Winfield Sr., and Houdini were friends. And Houdini was the older man, but yet the timing works. You know, I mean, and just exactly why the two guys might have been friends, I don't know. My grandfather was a manufacturer. He was a top degree Freemason. And you know, the Freemasons were very accepting of minorities. A lot of people don't get that. They may have funneled women out of the meetings and put the women into the board of the Eastern Star and stuff like that. But when it came to Native Americans, Jewish people, African Americans, they were welcomed into the Freemasons. Maybe Houdini was a Freemason. I should have researched this by now. But apparently, you know, well, there's no apparently about it. Everybody in my family, all my elders when I was a little kid, would say, you know, your grandfather was friends with Houdini. Whenever Houdini got to the upper upstate New York or the Rust Belt, you know, Ohio, Pittsburgh, whatever, he and my grandfather would get together and go have dinner. And Houdini was in Buffalo, which is where my my northern family kind of set up. And Houdini was in Buffalo at least 12 times performing. And, you know, that's just a little Houdini story since we brought it up. But he and my grandfather were buddies.
That's awesome. No, thanks for sharing that. That's really cool. We've done a lot with Houdini, so I love hearing anything about Houdini.
Well, you knew that he died on a Halloween day.
Yeah, yeah, he hung on for a little bit and then he ended up dying. And there's always like the rumors like was he killed? You know, was it the appendix, like sepsis? Yeah, there's lots of interesting theories floating around.
Why would you think anybody would want to murder him?
Well, so I don't say I believe it, but I've definitely read a lot of the theories where people think he was murdered because of his um, debunking, like public debunking of the mediums as he would go around.
Oh, okay.
Especially, I know there was a lot of interactions between Marjorie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle around the time when he got the famous punch to the gut. Obviously, I don't buy into this. I just know that's been a theory put out in there.
Well, sure, yeah. Well, I mean, it's no insult to me, whatever theory you buy, and I'm certainly not going to be disrespectful to you. What I would suggest is this. First of all, what was Marjorie's? Now, is Marjorie a sort of a disembodied spirit that came through a medium? Is that who Marjorie is? My memory's a little rusty.
Crandon was, I think her nickname was Marjorie.
Okay.
Her brother was supposedly the spirit that would come through her.
Hmm. Well, I'll have to look that up a little bit. But I would tell you this, my instinct is to lean a little bit away from this because the spiritualists I've known in my life, there's not been a single one of them that was violent. You know, that's one reason I kind of like the faith. I mean, you know, they're not all like perfect people. Like I'm not either, but yet, well, interesting. I'll research that. I mean, you do know this isn't occultism, but you know, Bruce Lee, the great.
Hmm.
I mean, this guy was a great, not only a great martial artist, but as far as I know, he was a great mystic. He was a great being, and the apparently the Asian masters didn't like him giving so many of the mystical martial arts secrets because the martial arts is no dumbass pursuit. There is a
Yeah.
spirituality to it. It is deeply to be respected, particularly the Asian. I mean, any martial arts is to be respected. It's a sport here in the West. Over there, it's a philosophy. It's
Hmm.
almost a religion, and it's greatly to be respected. And I've heard word that Bruce Lee was giving too many secrets away, and that's why not only was he taken out, but also his son. I
Yeah,
mean,
Brandon.
I have friends in the martial arts, and they go, "Oh yeah, Brandon Lee, that was no accident." So, well, you've given me something to think about. Wonderful.
Right. Yeah, like I definitely side with Houdini being killed by the appendicitis, and I think the blows just gave him, no, I'll be fine. It's nothing. It's just I got hit in the stomach, you know?
Just a flesh wound.
Yeah, it's just a flesh wound. Yeah, Monty
Not an
Python,
accident.
right? I was listening to one of your talks, and you said something about the paranormal that really resonated with me because we do presentations and we always ask, well, what's your perception of the paranormal? Like, what do you think it is? And most people only say ghosts.
Oh,
And just like you know, can you gave a really nice analogy. You said it was like a joke. Do you want to tell us what that was?
well, I'm not sure, but you know, I give a lot of talks and do a lot of podcasts during the year. But I mean, using the word paranormal to include ghosts is sort of like going to a zoo and expecting everything to be a zebra. You know, it's like, wait a minute, the zoo has lots of different kinds of animals. The
Hmm.
paranormal has a variety of subjects. Paranormal used to mean simply something that was outside the public acceptance of the normal. And it includes a lot of things like UFOs and cryptids and ghosts and earth energies and a lot of things. You know something? So I love these guys that they're like ghost hunters, you know, and they come up and go, "Oh, I'm a paranormal investigator." And okay, great. Are you doing UFOs? No. How about Bigfoot? No. It's like no, you're a psychic investigator because everything you find when you run around the dark with your cameras, you pronounce it to be the spirit of a disembodied human being, and therefore you know. So you're a psychic investigator is what you are, and I don't know. I mean, I have friends who are ghost hunters, but they don't tend to call themselves paranormal investigators. They're getting away from this funkified terminology. I hope that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, no, that's when we do presentations like October, we get asked to do a lot of those. Obviously, it's spooky season and stuff.
Sure. And you're cool
Uh,
guys. They're gonna
yeah,
want to gonna want to hang out with the cool.
yeah,
Only
right.
the cool need apply. I don't blame them.
Yeah, yeah, but we're always like, I ask that always first, and everyone's just like ghosts, and then we go into UFOs and cryptids and some of these other stuff.
Oh,
One of our other investigators is Navajo, grew up on the reservation, so he
yeah.
has a little
Oh,
different viewpoint.
you got to talk about a few skinwalkers now and then, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
His dad doesn't tell too many stories,
Oh yeah.
obviously, because they have that tradition where they don't want to tell anything to anyone outside of the tribal leaders. But
Oh no, wait a minute. Not it's not just anything. It's certain things.
yeah,
A lot of stuff they will tell you. It is the dad full blood Navajo.
yes.
Is the son.
No, he's Navajo and what is Alan? Cheyenne.
Oh, okay, but is he full native?
Yes.
See, you'll get different reactions out of people that are. See, people that are full native will be a little different. Or in my experience,
Hmm.
they'll be a little different with what they let out as to people that are part native. And they'll both be massively respectful of the tradition. But I mean, I have friends that uh, mostly Six Nations people, which is upstate, the Longhouse people. Um, and you'll find that the ones that are full blood native, well, there's very few of them, as we acknowledge. Of course, look at me. What full blood am I?
Right. Yeah.
I'm
Who's full
North
blood anymore?
American mutt. Scandinavian, Celtic, Anglo-Saxon. Probably got a little Roman. I mean, the Romans owned my ancestors for 400 years. Roman occupation of Britain. Still
Hmm.
figuring out how to sue. Yeah, where's my reparations? Come on, guys. But whatever. Um, where was I going with that flight of fancy? Anyway, I do think I respect what people don't tell me. And if I know that it's sacred, that it's special, I will never let it out.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if somebody knows something and I ask them a question and they don't tell me, at least tell me why it's sacred, why the
Right.
answer is special. And if they don't talk to me and I find the answer out some other way, which I so often do, it's not my fault, coach. If I end up pissing you off by publishing it, because I've never once been accused of blowing in a confidence, not once. But I need to know up front: is this protected? Why is it protected? And is there anything you can tell me if I promise never to write about it? Because understanding is way better than knowledge. It's way better. And if people just talk to me a little bit, I can get it figured out. And if I know what the right thing is to do, I will always do it.
No, I understand that. With Alan's dad, we actually have a story we shared on the channel,
Hmm.
and so I feel like we're good to talk about that because he was okay to share it with the channel and stuff.
I love to hear it.
Yeah, I'll tell you it. So he was trying to become like tribal police for skinwalkers, and
Slow down a little bit. What he was trying to become tribal
tri-
police force.
yeah, tribal police for just the skinwalkers.
So they're investigating these things.
Yeah,
The native people.
yeah. At least that's what I've been told.
Well,
So
no, that's
yeah,
cool. They
and
must be half white, if they're investigating them.
yeah, no, and he said one time they were out in the middle of the desert, and I know Sam knows this one, but they were in a camper, and all night they kept hearing like cows. And there's all these cows around their camper, and they'd look out the window and they'd see these cows and whatever. And in the morning they went out, and they didn't see any cow footprints. It was all human footprint.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta write that down, and I won't give you credit. I'll write it down. And I'll steal the story.
Yeah.
No, no, I'm being wise. That's beautiful stuff. Wow, that is super cool. And these were tribal police.
Yeah. So he was however, whatever the process is, I'm sure just like to become normal police, you have to go through a process. But
Little
that's what he was.
skinwalker training.
Yeah, Skinwalkers was. I guess they have
See
like
how
a
fast you can run.
yeah, and don't get lured in. No, they have lots of cool stories because they were out kind of near that Phoenix area, so they
Uh,
can tell you about the Phoenix lights because it happened right above them and stuff like that. So
I, since you brought it up, I'd like to. I hope I'm not departing from whatever your goal was for the program, but the Phoenix lights. Um, how high up, based on what you know of them, how high up in the air do they seem to be? Off the surface of the landmass. How high? Are they UFOs or something different?
so I'm not 100% sure because I have seen military flares. Colorado has a ton of military bases.
Yes, they do.
And so when they originally dropped the flares for a bit, it kind of looks like it, right? But at the same time, pretty quickly they will disperse in a bunch of different directions or burn out.
Hmm.
These ones were it looked higher than the mountain line. They looked bigger than flares and they stayed in formation. And Alan, his story was his dad was outside cooking, he was inside, and his dad had him and his brother come out and look, and these lights like came over. Now, Alan's not against the idea that maybe it's secret military craft or something, but he doesn't think it was like flares or anything like that.
Okay. I mean, um, I'm thinking of two things. Oh, well, one thing I'm thinking is I'm going to plug my laptop in pretty quick. But the other thing I'm thinking is um, Earth lights, witch lights, mystery lights that are terrestrial in origin. Without seeing those things and getting a really lot fuller description, I can't comment. But the way I look at things, I'd be really interested exactly what were they over, straight up from wherever they were when they were seen. What was on the ground underneath them? Because you ever heard of the? There's two British researchers, um, Paul Devereaux, Colin Wilson, another
Devereaux sounds familiar.
oh John Michel. These are three of my gods in paranormal research. They're all British, and they started looking up, trying to figure out. They're older than I am. Well, two of them are off the planet, but you know, I mean, I could have met these guys, but they were, older guys, but they were publishing a lot long before I started. They were studying, trying to make sense out of the UFO phenomenon because they were like in their 40s, 30s, and 40s during the UFO craze of the 60s, And there was nothing they could figure out that made any sense by stalking. But when they started making of where people were standing when they saw the lights, or what was directly underneath the lights when they manifested, they were starting to put together a pattern. People were on top of ancient sacred sites. Stonehenge, Great Pyramid. It's like when you're in the proximity of these sites that have been designed by the elders, the ancestors, the old timers, it was like there might have been some connection between earthly position, earthly energy, and human perceptions. So if it really isn't convincingly up in the stratosphere and, you know, I start to look at different causes. So that would be my tactic.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll send you the link to the video we had Alan talk about his, and then you can listen to it after. So,
I would love that. Well, not only that, First Nations people, some of them have very long traditions
mhm.
about extraterrestrial stuff. It's no miracle to them. Most of the First Nations people I talk to and get to know are upstate New York people, and they're not going to have identical traditions to anywhere else. But there's a nifty phenomenon since about the 70s that a lot of First Nations people from different parts of the nation and even the continents, they're hanging out with each other. They're
Mhm.
talking to each other. Their ancestors could have gone thousands of years without ever crossing paths, but in the contemporary world, they meet up, they compare traditions. It's very interesting. And I do hear a bit about the Western UFO traditions. I think the Hopi in particular might have really significant UFO tradition. I don't claim that based on personal exposure to any Hopi person, but I think many of the Native American cultures of North America consider the Hopi to be the daddies and the mommies, you know. That'd be fun to find out what they think about the UFOs, what their tradition is.
Yeah, for sure. I know. I don't think we've ever really talked to Alan as far as that type of tradition. Usually it's more like skinwalkers or cryptids,
Oh,
Sasquatch and stuff, and
yeah,
or his experiences.
sure.
It's kind of interesting you mentioned witch lights. Our buddy John was doing some research on witch lights, and he lives in Roswell, New Mexico, and he was talking all about New Mexico. And there's a lot of native, sites. Chaco National Canyon there is a big one. And so, yeah, I definitely like the connection you're making. And, that's one thing about researching is marking, because after enough occurrences, it can't be a coincidence, right?
Hmm. Sometimes folklore builds on folklore. I think if I were a materialist, structuralist, physicalist, skeptical realist, I would probably say it's a link of people telling stories. They tell the first stories, and all the stories build, and it gets into people's minds. So no, I don't fully agree with that observation. I do think there was a clear message in the pattern. I just can think of a way that other people would be able to, But frankly, that's sort of what I do as a author, researcher, interviewer. I realize I'm contending with not only materialist skepticism, but I'm contending with anti-spirituality. Somebody wants this world not to accept the faintest possibility of ghosts, spirits, afterlife, religion. Somebody wants everybody to throw that out. And I realize that I think everybody ought to be able to say everything they want and think everything they want. And and I'm also in a world where I don't think the case is proven that the universe is exclusively physical. I don't think it is. I think people see ghosts. I've seen a couple. I think human psychic abilities exist, ESP, animal ESP. I mean, this is a slam dunk. Why does anybody still argue about that? The answer is, well, I won't get into that. I think I've gotten a little far over the edge, but I am a proponent of the possibility that some paranormal phenomena is valid, and I feel like I need to stay very logical to be able to stick up for the points I make. And that means sometimes I'm opposing people whom I may like, but I got to tell them that doesn't hold water. And in the podcast I'm hosting, there's a lot of people who want to be on, and some of them, I feel like a college professor being asked to write a recommendation to graduate school for a student he doesn't believe in. Like some of these people, I kind of go, you do realize that I don't agree with everything you say. I don't agree with everything you say about the world. I don't agree with everything you say about yourself. And I'm warning you that if you get on my program, I'm going to call it like it is. There is a plague of false titles in the paranormal.
Hmm.
God, people run around calling themselves parapsychologists and claiming they, have all this connection with famous people. And I mean, I have people in Western New York. There was a famous Franciscan friar named Father Alphonsus Terbold. He was a good friend of mine, and he was a professor at St. Bonaventure University, and he would have been the exorcist of Western New York, of the diocese, had there ever been an accepted need of this kind of extreme ceremony. And he was a very famous person around here and very respected. Um, and you have no idea how many people these days are going around saying, well, Father Alfonso said this and he told me that. And I'm going, man, you never even knew him. And I've even got one person going, they believe they've got a psychic connection with his spirit. And he talks to them. And he told them this and he told them that. And I'm going, God, okay, maybe. How do you expect anybody to buy that? And, honestly, maybe my heart is with them. But as a researcher, when I get some camper on like that, I'm just gonna have to call them on it.
Yeah.
So how's we having a nice show so far? Should I
Oh,
shut
I'm
up?
enjoying it.
Oh,
No,
absolutely. I
you keep
love it.
going.
Okay, I'll just check the logs. Oh, I need a new
We
log.
talk about this stuff a lot ourselves, so like this is nothing new for us.
Yeah, we love it. We're glad that you're joining us. And
Yeah.
Well, this to me is a very interesting discussion that you guys and I are having. I mean, if I ever get anywhere near Colorado, I'll look you guys up and we'll have a beer. I
okay.
like to just shake hands and meet some of the people I do shows with and stuff. If I ever in their area, I love to just take a detour, drop in, say hi, have a cup of coffee, beer, then I'm gone. So,
Fair.
why don't you guys, tell me a little something you feel like talking about?
So I wanted, because you were talking in one of the places I heard about the top 10 like ghostly forms in your area, so New York.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
I didn't know if you'd be able to talk more about that.
Well, I think the top two ghostly forms anywhere in at least the eastern part of the United States are the little girl ghost and what the folklorists call the white lady. And there, I would bet you 50% of the apparition forms. In other words, the way ghosts are seen by people. Because there's no guarantee what they saw. They saw something. And what registered with them, you know, is so often the little girl ghost or the woman in white. And like I live in a small town, which I absolutely love this town. It's East Aurora, New York. It's about it's about 20 miles or less from Buffalo, southeast. And a little bit to our west is Orchard Park with the Bills Stadium, Highmark. And my little village of maybe 8,000 people, you have got enough little girl ghosts to make a brownie troop. And it's like they've got and the women in white. I mean, you've got a lot of those. I mean, the folklorists call it the white lady. And incidentally, it doesn't mean that they're Caucasian. It doesn't mean that they're all wearing white dresses. That's just the stereotypical term that folklorists use for the adult woman ghost. And a lot of them are pale. They're on the pale side, and some of them are indeed wearing filmy white clothing. But I mean, just for one of my books, I made a top 10 list of the adult women ghosts that weren't in white. Like here's the woman in maroon, here's the woman in red, got a woman in brown, got a lady in blue. It's like they come in different colors. There's a contrast between these two forms, the little girl ghost and the adult woman. The little girl doesn't usually come with a backstory. It's like 9 out of 10. There's this guy, yeah. It's like I saw the vampire and the werewolf bit me, and then there was a little girl too, and it's almost like a pitch in, a throw in rumor, but yet there are some really good eyewitnesses seeing this little girl. With the adult woman ghost, the white lady, there's much more commonly a backstory. This guy's wife, this guy's mother, stuff like that. So they're the top two common forms that I encounter. And as far as the rest, you get your old Indian, and incidentally, that's a respectful term because a lot of the First Nations people I know call each other Indians, and they refer to the word Indian. And I mean, for the longest time, I just conditioned myself to say Native American because I thought it was more respectful, and it turns out they don't give a damn. And but you've got your old Indian chief, and you've got your old soldier ghost, and my area, Western New York, near Buffalo and Niagara Falls, we've been settled by white guys for just about 123 years, or 223 years, like 1800 is about it. I know there was traders, trappers, Fort Niagara, I know all that stuff. But as far as people really living, white guys, people really living in the area and making roads and farms and houses and schools and churches and Masonic halls and pubs, 1800 is about it. And when you hear reports of the old soldier ghost, it's kind of fun to ask the witness, what kind of hat did it have? Because the War of 1812 was fought in my area. It was about a 60 square mile band, 30 miles, and the Niagara River is 30 miles long. And about a mile out on either side, the Niagara River, everything got torched during the war. Counter raids, conquests, battles, just like that for 3 solid years. Cannon fire. But the distinctive hat of that particular war was what they call a shako. It's like you take a top hat, the thing. It's like up to there, It's like the Mad Hatter, it's like that. And you, instead of leaving the brim all the way around, you cut it off like a baseball brim. You just, and that was a shako, and it had nothing to do with military effectiveness. The only advantage of a shako I can think of is that it made a bunch of short guys look tall. That was the only advantage of shake. It was the weirdest, but both sides wore it. And yet a lot of American people stereotype, because the revolution, 1776 thenceforward, was a much more familiar war to the general public. And the hat that was commonly worn by both sides was the tricorn. And the tricorn hat is like a farmer's cap, not much on top, but a wide brim. But when you make the tricorn, you just fold it up in 3 directions. So you make a triangle out of the brim. And that was what a lot of the military wore. So it'll be interesting if somebody goes, oh, I saw a ghost, old soldier ghost. What kind of hat did it have? But, there might have been some revolutionary tricorn activity, tricorn wearing hat soldiers around here. Geez, it's probably an indirect response. You get the little boy ghost, and it's not as common as a little girl. You get animal ghosts, typically dogs, cats, and horses. I would say maybe 5% of the ghosts I get are of animals. Exclusively dogs, cats, and horses. Animals that had a emotional connection with people. I've never heard of a ghostly gerbil or a haunted hamster, or these are animals that have got a little emotion, with people. Let me think. In my other top 10 list of ghostly forms, well, there are children ghosts, groups of children. I find that kind of rare, but more interesting than the average, and even more unusual and rarer than that is what I call the little people. Sometimes, and they're very often confused with the children ghosts. But I would say one of the very rare and very valuable apparition categories I encounter is basically fairies, little people. Yeah. Well, you know that virtually every Native American, First Nations, Indian society in North or South America or Central America has some kind of tradition about these little magical races of human-like beings. They've
Yeah.
all got that tradition. And a lot of white people in the United States, well, they aren't folklorists, they aren't paranormalists, they're doing whatever they do in life, but yet they tend to stereotype these magical, superhuman, tiny beings as Irish, Scottish, Germanic, um, British. And yeah, indeed, they're very prominent in the legends and folklore of those societies. But it doesn't mean they didn't exist somewhere else. And as a matter of fact, the native people I know are pretty private, talking about little people around outsiders. Well, pretty private may not be the word. They're very private about that. And I will interview people who will be describing a ghost story. And, they're white, a lot of them, most of them. And they'll be describing like a graveyard. And they saw this little kid, a child ghost, playing hide and seek behind a stone. And maybe I know that graveyard. And I know that they don't have a stone there that's higher than about 10 inches. It's just one of those old timers. The stones are either fallen or broken, or they were tiny to begin with. And I go, how old was the kid? And they'll go, he looked like he was about 8. And I go, okay, cool. What was he doing? They go, oh, he was standing behind the stone. I go, how does a 4-foot kid hide behind that stone? And the witness will go, oh, yeah, he was really small. It's like it dawned on them under my querying. And it's taken me a long time to sort my head around that particular phenomenon because I've noticed it before. You would think if somebody sees a ghostly form that's 8 inches tall, the first thing they'd say is, my God, it was tiny. But they don't. A lot of times the witness will say, I saw a ghost. And why would the size is so conspicuous? Why wouldn't they mention that? And I think I figured out the answer. We're in a world in which there's a lot of things we see that aren't very big. Like for instance, my water bottle here, it's not very big. But we don't see ghosts very often. And so when they see something supernatural, it's like they're just bedazzled. And the first thing they think to mention is they saw something supernatural. It was there a few seconds, then it's gone. Well, as far as another ghostly form I hear reported now and then is the shadow form. And that's been a lot more common in like the last 20 years. The popularity of the TV ghost hunting shows has affected the type of apparitions people report.
Folklore building on folklore, like you said.
Yeah, I think so. And it's like, I'm not the biggest fan of surveillance ghost hunting, reality TV ghost hunting. I think we ought to try it. I mean, if you're investigating any kind of researching any kind of a haunted site, sure. If you work with some ghost hunters, get them in there and see what they find. But don't like sell people the idea that you're communicating with the spirits of the dead, because we don't have any idea of knowing what that anomaly you get on your film. It doesn't state what it is. You get an anomaly, and what its sources could be, I don't know. And I do have some inside connections with some of the ghost hunting shows. And again, I'm going to say, I don't think we should quit doing it. I think we should, if there's an avenue, a potential avenue towards the truth, and you can think of it, if you can think of what it is, you got to try it. But I just think, let's be careful about what we conclude. if we conclude something, the evidence needs to provoke us to conclude that. In other words, we're looking for something and we get the slightest scrap of evidence and there it is. And I've been at parties with producers of some of the paranormal programs. I mean, not within the last 5 years, but I mean like 10 years ago, and they would be complaining, camera teams and producers, and you get a couple drinks in people and they loosen up a little bit. They were complaining about being provoked to find, physical evidence. I mean, recordable evidence of things, and they were never getting it, or maybe 1 out of 50. And, I think the shadow, it's a pretty, I'm not accusing anybody of faking anything, but, it's a kind of a natural thing to come up when you're filming at night. You might get a shadow. So anyway, I do get people occasionally reporting the shadow form. Incidentally, the shadow form, while it's reported a lot more commonly now, it's not a new phenomenon. It just used to be really rare. And in the Middle Ages, for instance, there would occasionally be a shadow reported at a church, but there was a stigma on it. There's this stereotype that if the light and shade qualities of an apparition are anything short of really pale, it's negative. Even a smoky one is considered negative. And I'm not saying I believe that, but all right, what about other ghostly forms? I should have yanked up a book and looked at my top 10 list, but I think that's good enough for now.
Yeah, no, that was good. I have kind of a pseudo
should,
follow-up question to that
you're
one.
free to say shut up, but keep going.
Hey, I was enjoying it, so I'm not gonna stop that. No, so we've talked and we've collected some stories with ghosts and stuff, especially here in Castle Rock. It's a lot easier because we live here, we know the town really well, and so we're able to dig up the history and stuff like this. But we see a lot of connections with the ghost stories and buildings or locations with rhyolite. And so I was going to see
With what?
with rhyolite. So it's a type of stone, rhyolite.
RHY?
Yeah.
OLIT? Oh, well, sure. Yes, rhyolite. I knew that instantly. I was about to tell you.
So I was just seeing with
rhyolite.
you if there's different stones that maybe you see more occurrences with hauntings and stuff like that, or different, like, is there rocks involved or that kind of stuff?
Very good question. 2 responses, and I hope I don't forget the second one. I'll tell you the second one right now. A lot of the sacred monuments in North Europe, like the megalithic, the big stones, they went wide and far to find a precise kind of stone they wanted. And very often, stone like it's got a crystalline structure in it. It's got little crystals, and you realize that crystals are used in computers. There's enormous mythology, legend about crystals. The crystal skulls.
Yeah.
The crystal ball that the gypsies, seers, and all that would use as instruments of divination, which means looking into another realm, getting information through psychic means. So, is rhyolite a crystalline stone? Do you know?
I can look it up real quick.
Go for it. Because if it is, I would say, yeah, hell yes. That's right in the pattern of the old timers. They're more powerful religious monuments. They picked special stone to create them.
Let's see if I can
creating like a conductor for things to like attach
Absolutely.
to.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying they're spiritual things, but they might be things that get people experiencing visionary phenomena. They put people in an altered state.
Okay, here we go. It says rhyolite is the most silica rich of volcanic rocks. It is generally glassy or fine grained, but it may be porphyritic, containing larger mineral crystals.
Well, well, hell,
See, you
that's
called it.
great. That's right in line with it. Yeah, way to go. You know, the next time I do a program, I'll claim I knew all about rhyolite, and I won't give you credit. I'll steal your idea. I won't pay you royalties for that.
Okay. Yeah, no, we've just it's weird because there's a lot of older buildings, but none of the wood ones really have ghost stories here, but all the rhyolite ones do, and it's weird, you know? We're like,
Hmm.
why is that?
I think that's a connection.
Yeah.
When but that leads me to my second point. And I thought of a third one. I hope I don't forget that. But you'll find I'm remembering I used to play a lot of tennis, and I remember one time finding a professional instructor whom I really respected. And I said, look, I don't think I'm hitting my serve quite right. You know, it used to be better than it is now. And, wondering what I could be doing wrong. And, with the serve in tennis, it's the most miraculous stroke in the game. Do you guys ever watch tennis? You know what I'm talking about?
Hmm.
That wonderful overhead motion of the serve. Well, it's just a really unusual shot. And there's all kinds of garden variety tennis pros that can help you with something, your forehand, your backhand, your volley. They'll give you a tip that'll really help you. When it comes to the serve, you need somebody really, really good. And this guy that I was talking to said, well, there's connection in what you might be doing right or wrong, and then there's primary connections. And it's like a garden variety pro can give you a little tip on your footwork that'll help you for about a week. And then you're back to your old bad habits. It takes somebody really good to identify a causal connection. And in the upstate paranormal, near where I live, Buffalo, you get people talking about, there's a lot of limestone up there. There's a lot of clay. Well, wait a minute, buddy. The whole Northeast. Yeah, it ought to be haunted. The whole thing ought to be haunted. And it's like, I'm not sure that's causing anything. There's also like oxygen. There's also like wood. There's steel.
Hmm.
It's like we've got to come up with a philosophy that at least contributes to an understanding of why that affects. So yeah, so I'm almost thinking that that connection you made to the rhyolite, that might be primary. That is very interesting. One of my favorite paranormal scholars, I mentioned his name a little bit earlier, is Paul Devereux, British scholar. And when I talk about a paranormal scholar, in the terms of John Michelle and Colin Wilson and Janet and Colin Board, I mean, there's some great minds that have studied the paranormal. These are large minds. They are great scholars, but they're not mainstream. They're not going to be getting grants and fellowships from colleges and whatever, but they're wonderful minds. And Paul Devereux has come up with this theory he calls exceptional human experience, EHE. And really, any haunted house is an EHE zone. Because when you interview eyewitnesses who think they're living in a haunted house, the stuff they tell you, they don't talk about Bigfoot and UFOs, but yet they're interpreting all kinds of shadows and light forms and electrical phenomena and sounds and moving objects and apparitions. And they just have this shopping list of stuff they see. And I can't tell you they saw that, and I can't tell you they didn't. I can't tell you anything except there's a pattern here. It's a pattern of perceived exceptional experience. And you got stories and you got places, and the stories pile up at places. That's what I do. I look for the patterns of stories and places. And man, when you get that crystalline connection, that's pretty interesting. So I think that's a primary cause. I think you got something there. Now, is this rhyolite in the ground underneath it? It's a natural substance, right?
Yeah, so there actually used to be a rhyolite quarry in Castle Rock. It's now a park. People hike it. There's supposedly experiences up there. But the rhyolite now, they've quarried to make the stones to build these buildings.
Oh, ha, ha, ha. What's it look like?
Oh, here, pull up some.
The
Do you want
wonders.
rhyolite or do you want the building?
Either
Because
one.
let's see, there's rhyolite. It's just kind of like a
Okay.
reddish.
Hmm.
But
Oh, Reddit. Okay.
yeah, let's see. I will pull up the Chamber of Commerce.
The wonders of technology.
Right?
Right.
Maybe I'll look up rhyolite while
It's
you're
kind of
fiddling
it,
around.
it kind of it's hard to come across, but
So, no, I believe you. So you got this kind of like big ass rhyolite building.
yeah. And there's
No
quite
wonder
a
they're
few.
no damn wonder they're haunted. Why
Yeah,
doesn't somebody talk to us before they do stuff like that?
right. Yeah, no, it's a weird connection. Like I said, there's a lot of older wood houses, but there's no real stories coming from them. It's always the rhyolite buildings.
Well, that's very interesting. Let me ask you this. When was the area settled? And a lot of the wood buildings, for instance, are they 100 years old or 150 or,
Late 1800s.
oh, well, Greek revival, like they got the columns and the, you know,
Uh,
pediment over the door and maybe a tower and,
no, none of the Greek revival. It's
okay.
more just like if you think of that kind of, I guess the wood ones are very stereotypical Old West buildings, like what you'd think you'd see in an Old West town.
Oh, okay.
And
They're,
then
they're,
the rhyolite ones are very, I guess, Eastern in appearance, like you'd see in like a New York or, Connecticut, but they're made of rhyolite.
Sure. Well, one of the fundamental connections I've discovered in supernatural folklore, particularly ghostly folklore, is that there's a connection between styles of architecture and ghost stories. Ghost stories tend to follow. I mean, we've established in our discussion that there's a potential connection to material. There may also be a connection to shape and to geometry. And in my part of the world, which is upstate New York, and I've written books about other cities like Rochester and Saratoga Springs, which is north of Albany. It doesn't matter what the material of a building is. If it's built in a certain shape, form, it'll have a higher tendency to get supernatural folklore. And these old styles tend to be pretty classic church styles, Greek temple, Greek revival, Gothic revival, Mayan revival, because they're copying features of old churches. And I mean, I'm not telling you there's a cause and effect relationship here between being in a building built in a certain way and somebody thinking they see a ghost, but there's certainly a pattern there. And if you look at, we probably can't get too far into what I call occult architecture. This has been kind of a niche interest of mine, and I'm not trained with architecture. And there are subtleties um, that I'm just not going to pick up, you know. But all ancient societies, pre-industrial societies, they built their temples differently than people built their houses. It's just like build your house any way you want. But when we're going to make a building that's important to our society, to the gods, there are accepted styles of doing it. And I think the reason they built their churches and their state buildings with such architectural specifics is because they thought it would enhance the trance experience. It's like you're in a cathedral. It's meant to be imposing. Maybe it's meant to be visionary. I mean, what a religion wants is followers. It wants, you know, new subscribers. And if somebody's in a cathedral and they're hearing a sermon, or they're going up for a confession or a christening, or I don't know about that, but whatever, if they have a powerful experience when they're in that sacred space, the religion is proving its point. And all I'm telling you is that it's at least a theory that the old timers had, that if you built your visionary space with certain particulars, mostly shape, geometry, alignment with other sacred sites, maybe astronomy, orient it towards something in the sky, the people who attend it are going to be more likely to have visionary experience. And if you are living in a house that's built out of a kit of Greek revival architecture, you live in a little church. You may not know it. And if you recruited a prominent architect in the golden age, late 1800s, early 1900s, of Frank Lloyd Wright, Louis Sullivan, H.A. Richardson, Claude Bragdon. I mean, I got a list of names, but if you recruited one of these guys to build your house, you're living in a church.
Mhm.
It may be a very subtle one, but it'll have shapes and ratios and proportions, and it probably won't have the geology, the astronomy, the alignment, because those are things you can't do in a contemporary city. You don't have. It's not like you're a Bronze Age king who just comes in and takes over the turf and talks to the druids and goes, "Where do we put our temple?" When you're building something in a modern city, about all you can do is oblige by the shape and geometry. But yet, I encounter a lot of buildings. Doesn't matter what they're made of. If they're in that shape, they'll get a lot of stories.
Yeah. Well, no, you said Frank Lloyd Wright. It made me think of Falling Water. It's one of my favorite ones he designed. But you were talking about geometry and alignments. Obviously, the pyramids, Göbekli Tepe, maybe. Washington, D.C. even has some weird geometry. So,
Masonic.
yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it weird. It's, yeah, DC. But you see, there are societies that have entered our time period that have preserved the old traditions. And, the Freemasons are one of them. There have been a lot of other groups like that. The Shakers. Um, it's kind of a long list. It's like at one point in time, the whole society did special architecture when it came to really important buildings. But as time went on, we became more functional. We had the Industrial Revolution, we had the Reformation, we had a number of factors that kind of took away the tradition of spirituality in the gestures of architecture. And the only people who preserved it were occult groups. Um, Gnostics, the Knights Templar, they they built in their own style. Um, Possibly Rosicrucian groups. I mean, they're not known for architecture, but when they build something, and definitely the Freemasons. I mean, those guys, they're all about architecture.
Mhm.
That's their raison d'être. So no wonder there.
Yeah, and before I don't let Sam talk the entire time, I'm gonna pass it off. But I wanted to get see if you had any thoughts on Ed and Lorraine Warren. Obviously, they're pretty big, and I wanted to see what you thought. You don't have to answer it. I know they travel around in a lot of those places up there.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know either one of them, and they are controversial.
Hmm.
There's no denying it. They've got their detractors. My old friend, Father, are you setting me up or what? Why did you? Anyway, my old
I
friend,
just wanted
Father,
to know because
I'm
I don't know, it's something that
respect
popped
that
up in my
question.
head. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know either one of them, so I can't criticize them personally. I think Ed might have been an ex-cop,
Okay.
ex-police, and I always respect first responders. police, fire, military, big respect. Anybody that puts it on the line to protect me and Sam and Keegan, anybody that risks themselves to protect me, I respect that. But at any rate, all I'll tell you is that my old friend, Father Alphonsus, the Franciscan friar, okay, I'm not even going to go there. He told them to stop using his name.
Okay.
And that's the worst thing he could say to anyone. He was a very gentle man, but he felt like they were trying to get famous by hyping up stuff that maybe wasn't really there to begin with, or else they were exaggerating wildly. And that could have been their publicity crew. Who knows what it was? But that was what he thought. I mean, Lorraine could very well have been a gifted psychic. But the thing you got to realize about a gifted psychic is like a gifted basketball player. They're not going to score 55 points every night. A psychic is not always going to be on. It's like any other human artistic ability. Human psychic abilities should not be expected to act like mathematics. Therefore, I think someone professing psychic talents needs to be, they need to acknowledge that. It's like, don't exaggerate stuff. If you're not getting the mojo, don't say you do. So I guess that's my backwards way of saying from my sources of people I know who knew them. I probably would say they were not infallible. And I'm being diplomatic. Is that good enough?
No, that works. Yeah. No,
All right.
I was really interested because whenever people talk about ghost hunters and stuff, the modern people come up, but it's always Ed and Lorraine Warren, especially with the movies that have come out recently. So
You know.
I figured that area I wanted to see if you had any insights. So I appreciate
Oh,
that.
I do. I'm just being diplomatic. Um, let me let me say this. If you're going to mess with stuff, you better know what it is. And I honestly think some people in the ghost side of the paranormal, they mess with stuff that can be really dangerous. And I think maybe they don't really believe. Because if they did believe, they wouldn't be starting stuff up.
Yeah, they wouldn't be trying to fight it.
I got to be completely honest with you. My old friend told me of a couple of cases in which people got into stuff that they made worse. They should have left it alone. Because you must never forget. Well, first of all, talking to spirits in another realm or running around the dark with a camera has nothing at all to do with demonic possession. There is a long tradition in all the major religions that I've ever heard of. Certainly the three Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. They all got some tradition for dealing with this very rare occasion in which a disembodied essence can take over a living human being. They've all got some scheme for that. And anybody who's got responsible exposure to the subject understands how dangerous it is. It's really dangerous. It's dangerous if you misdiagnose an individual. It's dangerous if you don't handle that individual perfectly. And I'm not telling you I believe in devils and possession. I'm just telling you what people who have confided in me have told me. And I think it's not fun and games. Not that. Maybe running around the dark with the camera is fun and games, and setting yourself up to talk to the dead is fun and games. It can be. It doesn't. That stuff doesn't hurt anybody. But when you start getting into people who are suspected of, or who suspect themselves of being possessed, that's a whole different because now you're dealing with the psyche of a vulnerable individual. And I think I probably said too much.
No, I found it very entertaining. I was actually thinking, so obviously when a lot of times the people possessed, but they think demonic, right? But how much of it possibly could be dimensional, like something from a different dimension?
I don't know how it gets into a human being and controls their personality is the, I don't know.
Right.
I'm not telling you I personally believe in demonic possession. I do believe in massive, uh, dangerous F-ups with
Hmm.
the human psyche. And I think, you know, well, as far as an interdimensional being, I mean, I personally cannot envision another dimension. I just can't visualize it. And I've never met anyone who could help me do it. And, without suggesting that there can't be another dimension, probably is. But, well, certainly a possibility. Uh, how would we? Huh.
Yeah,
All
how
right,
would
I'll
you even
meditate on
document it, right?
I'll meditate on that. The next program I do, I'll bring that up and have the answer, and I won't give you credit either.
uh, well, like I said before, I take over the interview because I'm notorious for doing that. Sam, do you have some questions that I didn't already touch on by accident?
I mean, there's some that he touched on himself with like the little people and the fairies, but to keep on this kind of subject with the dimensions, we can see the downsize of the dimensions, but we can't see it from a higher level because if you look at like the 2D dimension, like 2D is like a paper like plane where like you can see it like when you write down, you're writing down in like the 2D, but we can't see it from that higher level. Well, that's kind of like the perspective of dimensions, but then there's the other like alternate reality type like side of it as well.
Yeah, I've just never met anyone who could get me to be able to visualize what it is. I mean, I can use the term, but as far as really, and maybe I should probably pursue this a little bit because I know there are people out there trying to do a podcast or a video or something and help you visualize a dimension other than the third. Um, I guess I just haven't either delved hard enough into that or I'm just not capable. Because, I think we've all got our talents and what we're interested in, what we're good at. And I always found myself much more interested by the ancient past than I ever was by
Fair.
the future. Like I would read a historical fiction, fantasy, adventure novel way before I read science fiction. And I read tons of science fiction in my life, but I always found myself much more inspired by the stuff of the past than by the speculative fiction of the future. And I have read a lot of it. And, I think maybe that might be why I can't visualize the fourth dimension. And my God, if I can't visualize the fourth, how am I going to visualize the fifth? It's like,
Right.
hit it. So maybe one of you guys can help me with that.
Oh, I am no expert there. I've read some things and I don't know if it's stuck.
Yeah, reading comprehension, I can fault myself now and then.
In the book, A Ghost Hunter's Journal, you talked about, or like uh, two different chapters talked about like the healing salve or the salve of healing and the medicine ceremonies,
Oh,
which,
wow, you got the original Ghost Hunters Journal. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Well, my native friends really believe that that you can heal people in different ways than Western medicine. And honestly, according to my sources, some pretty responsible people, some of the time, the wisdom of the native elders of the upstate was more effective than Western medicine. And they might use local ingredients, and they might have and ingredients that weren't discovered as medicine by the West. And they would and time was important. Like you had to go out there different times of day or night, maybe a special moon cycle, maybe a special day of the year. And you had to have a ceremony about the way you gathered the plant or the herb. I have to be honest with you, that's something in the paranormal realm that I really do believe. I just have heard too much from too many responsible sources that I don't criticize that. Yeah, I think sacred medicine can be very powerful some of the time.
I mean, I definitely agree with that.
Mhm.
Like, I know a couple people have done, like, I don't know if it's actual correct medicine ceremonies, but like types of medicine ceremonies or psychedelic journeys is more of what they've kind of done the lines of that, like, have done, like, healing through, like, in a natural way with, like, people that guide them, like, the, they have, like, shamans that guide them through their journey, or not really guide them, but, like, watch over them, making sure that it doesn't go too far. And I've always kind of
Oh,
been, like,
sure.
interested in that type of stuff, like a
Yeah,
spiritual journey.
yeah. I mean, you think of something like ayahuasca. I've known a lot of people who've done that, and you're absolutely right. You need God, what did they call it when I was in college? I think they called it a trip watcher or something. But it's like if you're planning on like doing mushrooms or hallucinogens or something like that, you always wanted a wingman that would not do them and it would keep you from getting into trouble. Um, you know, um, I've always been a little suspicious out of any insight you get from a drug. Always. But yet, you know, I hear a lot of people. I didn't know about healing, maybe emotional healing, but I had thought that ayahuasca and the hallucinogenic drugs were aimed at the trance experience, and that's spiritual healing, not physical. But you know, there's a lot of stuff that the whites have never heard of, and it's so funny. It's like you'll have a very complete body of folklore, for instance, for the Six Nations people. You've got books out to here, stack them up. And yet, they might have 100 stories about one subject and very few about another. And you realize that this other subject that they have almost nothing but suggestions about, this is something that the, the First Nations people, they didn't want to talk about. It may be just as developed in their world as anything else, but the whites don't have any stories about it because they didn't talk. And I do know that there might have been some subdued drug tradition in the Northeast. Um, I don't know any more than that. Actually, Mike, I'm so sorry we didn't have him on tonight. This has been a very complete program. I mean, we've gotten all over the place tonight. But I'm sorry we didn't have Mike on because we could have asked him, Mike Bestine, my Algonquin friend and co-author, and we could have asked him, Mike, what's going on with with the mushrooms? What do you guys do any of that? He'd probably either level with us or tell us he couldn't talk about it.
Fair.
Hey, we can always do another one. This has been really fun.
It's fun for me, guys.
Absolutely.
Just have a great holiday season coming up. We got that coming, and we got this about 6, 7 week period, which is very rich for hauntings, incidentally, in many American communities. I would find that the chunk of the year, you split the year up into like eighths. For me, probably the chunk that gets the best quantity of stories would be between about Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's a time when families come back together, and the winter solstice is coming up, and get some cool stuff. So you guys take great care, and it's been a privilege to be on the show with y'all.
Yes, no, it's been a
Yes.
privilege to have you. And before you leave, we want you to be able to tell the viewers where they can find your books and you have a newsletter and stuff like that.
I do. I do have a newsletter. It's the newsletter of Mason Winfield. I have a website, masonwinfield.com. Spell my name right, you'll get there. And my books are on Amazon with a variety of publishers. I have a new one coming out that I'm really happy with. It's called The Elven Smith. It is a book of memoirs of a contemporary wizard. And I don't, nothing like Harry Potter. No, there's no, like, he's always mocking Harry Potter out. But it's a guy who's just dictating his life and some of his adventures. And it's a sequel to an earlier book, but this one gets deeply into megalithic culture, shamanism, the Ice Ages, deep Celtic legend. And it does so in the guise of a sort of an adventure novel and a memoir. So I'm really happy with it, and more to come. So masonwinfield.com, track me down, send me an email, contact form through masonwinfield.com. I'll put you on the newsletter and you keep track of my endeavors.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure to check out that one because it sounds really good.
Yeah, definitely does.
Honored. Night, guys.
Sweet.
Well, thank you
Have a
so
good
much,
night.
Mason. Have a good night and have a good holiday season.
You bet y'all. Till next time.
Once again, Sam and I want to say a big thank you to Mason for joining us. This was an excellent episode, and we both had such a great time discussing a whole plethora of topics. And so make sure you go check out Mason's website, go find the books on Amazon, and sign up for that newsletter to keep up to date with his endeavors. But until next time, for more Culz interviews, click that link to your left. For more about what we're doing here at Culz Paranormal, click that link to your right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe. And let us know, is there any questions you'd like us to ask Mason in a follow-up interview episode?